You unlock this door with the key of learning. Beyond it is a range of other dimensions. Dimensions of war. Dimensions of peace. Dimensions of the absurd. You're moving into lands of both fact and fiction. The real and the unreal. You've just crossed over into the Nomad History Channel. There are a lot of extremely cool alternate universe stories out there surrounding World War II, ranging from extremely grim alternate universes like the Man in the High Castle and Fatherland universes, where in the former the Axis completely win the war, and in the latter, Nazi Germany completely dominates Europe, instilling a horrific regime. Or to just the downright silly, like the mech-filled Red Alert universe. On a side note, the Red Alert universe absolutely deserves its own video, even if it's just to talk about Tim Curry in this game. I mean, watch this clip.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
And there's also the World War series, which has an alien race invading Earth, forcing all nations to work together. But there doesn't seem to be a lot in the way of alternate World War I fiction. In fact, except for some excellent maps on Reddit and some good blog posts written about hypothetical scenarios, the only example that really sticks out in my mind is the video game Iron Storm: World War Zero. The game was originally developed by 4X Studios for the PC in 2002, and then ported to the PlayStation 2 in 2004 by Rebellion Developments. It plays like most other first-person shooters of the time, and is a fairly low-budget and unremarkable game, though it is notable for two main things. The first is the game's brutal difficulty. The second thing is that the game has really interesting and well-researched lore. While the scenario itself is a bit absurd, it comes off as somewhat believable, or at least well thought out, due to the actual historical research that must have gone into this game. The basic premise is that the story takes place in an alternate 1964, in which the First World War never really ended. The Great War, in this universe, between the Central Powers and the Allied Powers, seems to have happened like it did in our reality, occurring mostly from 1914 to 1918. The main diverging point in this universe starts in Russia. In the real world, from 1917 to roughly 1921-22, the former Russian Empire experienced a brutal civil war, which saw the Bolsheviks successfully best a wide range of differing opponents. From those who wanted to re-establish the Tsar and the Empire, to other left-leaning groups, like the Mensheviks or Social Revolutionaries, to many independent movements from Ukraine, Poland, Finland, and even some Muslim groups in Central Asia. In our reality, Bolsheviks achieved a total victory over these enemies, either completely crushing them, forcing them to flee to other nations where they had no power. However, it appears that in this universe, after the October-November Revolution of 1917, the Bolsheviks are struggling to even control Moscow, and so we're not a powerhouse that they were in this universe. With the Bolsheviks struggling in the West, in the East, a pro-Tsarist Russian warlord, Baron Nikolai Alexandrovich von Ungren-Sternberg, takes control of a recently reoccupied Mongolia in 1921, where it has been taken over by Chinese forces, and after establishing his own rule over Mongolia, then launches an attack on Russia, with the goal of crushing the Bolsheviks and re-establishing a form of absolute monarchy over an expanded Russo-Mongolian empire. In the real world, Mongolia had become independent from Qing China in 1911, with several nomadic princes establishing a sort of nomadic federation that ruled until it was dismantled by forces from the recently established Republic of China in 1919. Like in the game, the Chinese were expelled by the forces of the very real Baron von Ungren-Sternberg in 1921, who then re-established the Confederacy before centralizing power on himself as a sort of deity or reincarnation of Genghis Khan. In the game's universe, he then uses this power to invade Russia, conquer it, and then make himself the new Tsar. Von Ungren-Sternberg is an extremely interesting figure himself. An ethnic Baltic German from the Baltic provinces of the Russian Empire, he was raised in a life of extreme privilege, thanks to being part of the aristocratic class that was seen by the Bolsheviks as the main reason for Russia's woes. While being extremely privileged and rising up through the ranks of the Russian army very quickly, he was viewed as a great nuisance by the military, mostly due to his eccentric views regarding occultism and obsession with expanding the Russian Empire greatly beyond its capacity. Because of this, he was stationed in eastern Siberia throughout the Great War, which subsequently made it easier for him to make a power grab in Mongolia once the revolution began. It is said that once he took over Mongolia, he genuinely began to believe that he was the reincarnation of Genghis Khan, and forcefully began a cult with himself at the centre. And then he occupied Mongolia with apparently no real intention of actually invading Russia. So I guess he just sort of planned to stay in Mongolia as its ruler? This meme pretty much sums it up. I find it quite funny. It's quite funny. I find it funny. Unfortunately for him, in our universe, by 1921, the Bolsheviks had done extremely well in the Civil War, reconquering almost all of Siberia by this point, and actually launched a preemptive attack into Mongolia first, defeating his army very quickly. He was then captured and executed a couple months later. Then the Bolsheviks installed a friendly government, led by the Communist Party of Mongolia. If, in our universe, he truly meant to invade Russia and beat the Bolsheviks, then this was a foolhardy idea. There is just no way he would have been able to do this, due to the combined factors of the raw might of the Red Army in the Civil War, and the relatively disorganised and small army at his own disposal, as well as having to deal with the Mongolian communist partisans which were very active in the Mongolian plains at this time. However, in the World War Zero universe, the Bolsheviks were in disarray, and this allowed Ungren-Sternberg to successfully mount an invasion that saw him conquering the entirety of the former Russian Empire. By 1929, he had not only declared himself the great Tsar and Khan of this new Russo-Mongolian Empire, but also as a sort of demigod, whose destiny it was to conquer the rest of Eurasia, and so he turned his attention to the Atlantic, launching an invasion into a weakened Europe, which was halted by the United States and the rest of Western Europe in Germany, turning this area into an eternal battleground for the next couple of decades. Unfortunately, we don't get much lore focusing on Western Europe in this same period from 1917 to 1929, so it is unclear why the Americans are still in Europe and not pursuing a policy of self-isolation. The policy of self-isolation that came about in the United States after the war in our universe came about due to many American politicians just simply thinking that intervening in the war was a big mistake that had cost the US too much for too little gain, or came from a similar attitude of simply just not wanting to deal with the European fallout from after the war. This fallout took the form of many revolutions. The revolutions that occurred in Europe between 1917 and 1923 affected the majority of countries in Europe. I personally speculate that in this universe, that these revolutions were on a much larger scale. These revolutions varied wildly in ideology and cause from case to case, all across Europe, taking the shape of independence movements, such as in Ireland, to attempted revolutions in the style of the Soviet Union, like what happened in Germany, to the establishment of new governments, like the rise of the Fascist Party in Italy. But that these revolutions led to much wider and greater unrest. Regardless, the invasion forces the remaining European states to form into one government, the United States of Western Europe. Warfare remains similar to the warfare of the actual Great War, but on a greater technological scale. Perhaps the most sinister piece of lore we have from this game is that in this universe, the United States and its European allies can no longer finance this never-ending war through government money alone, and so turn to a unique form of private funding. They allow private investors to personally finance soldiers and speculate on their odds of survival on the stock market. Grim, right? Really horrible look into this universe. The fact that there is so much monetary value in soldiers living and dying leads some of the characters in the game to speculate about whether or not this war is being extended by some of those on the Western faction who have a great monetary interest. This little piece of information allows us to start really speculating what the government of the United States of Europe is really like. I personally think that due to the constant state of war, along with this extreme privatized military, that we're looking at some sort of amalgamation between neoliberal economics and fascist state control. You imagine the horror, my god. When I said that this game was very well researched, I meant more that it is well researched in the fact that it goes for a very obscure historical figure and captures his life quite accurately up to a point. But let's just acknowledge that the scenario in this game could probably never happen. A weakened Russia, along with the Mongolia of the 20th century, simply could not develop the weaponry needed to continue the war against the United States and all of Western Europe combined. It's absurd, but I do think it's still kind of cool. In a horrific kind of way, of course. And that's the grim dystopia of World War Zero. Hello! I have a beard now. Not really a beard, it's just beard and bum fluff, quite rough bum fluff. It kind of hurts. Anyway, I haven't been bothered to shave, but I just wanted to say that if you enjoyed this look at an alternate universe and a piece of media, please say so, and say if there's any other alternate media universes that you want us to look at. If you enjoyed the video in general, don't forget to subscribe, give us a like, and I please urge you to comment, even if it's just to say that you really like the video. Hopefully it's not a negative comment, but if it is, do it anyway. It helps us know what to improve. Yeah, stay safe, shave if you have to, do wash, and love ya. See you soon. Have a nice week.